Good morning. My name is Ted Clouser, host of Win the Minute, Win the Day, the show that focuses on bringing hope to the chaos. Today, we have Jeremy Ryan Slate as our guest. Jeremy is the founder of the Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. He studied literature at Oxford University and is a former champion powerlifter turned media entrepreneur. In iTunes, he was ranked the #1 podcast in the business category and number 78 in the top 100. Jeremy was named one of the top 26 podcasts for entrepreneurs to listen to in 2017 and 2018 by CIO magazine, top podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine in 2019, and millennial influencer to follow in 2018 by BuzzFeed. The Create Your Own Life podcast has been downloaded over 2.5 million times. He's also a contributing editor of the New Theory magazine and Grit Daily. After his success in podcasting, Jeremy and his wife founded Command Your Brand Media to help leaders use the power of podcasts to change the world. I love their mission, which is we help people to change the world and better mankind through the power of podcasting. Well, welcome, Jeremy. It's an honor to have you here today.
Hey, Ted. I'm stoked to be here, man. I know both of us have wanted to do this for quite a while, so I just appreciate you taking out the time and having me today, man.
Absolutely. Well, it's an interesting story. I've not shared this with you, but actually in May of 2020, my very first LinkedIn Live I ever watched was you. You had interviewed Adi Arizi, who was the CEO.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome.
The CEO of Teamy, and you just inspired me that I knew I wanted to be in that position. So never shared that with you, but I appreciate you being part of that story.
Hey, brother, I'm always glad to inspire and help and kind of, get people moving in the right direction. If I could do that, that's a big part of why I do what I do.
Absolutely. Well, let's just jump right in. What's your approach to personally waking up with a go win the day attitude?
So I walk through Kohl's in my front yard every morning. No, I'm just messing with you. So for me, I'm not a super early riser. I'm up at 7 a.m. every morning. But I'm usually working later into the night. If it's last night, we did watch a marathon of The Office, so I can't really complain. But for me, I get up first thing. I have breakfast, and I go from there to the gym, and I do usually it's like a modified 45-minute workout. I used to be a power lifter in my early 20s, so I still take a lot of what I did there into what I'm doing now. So I'm usually doing about 80% of my max of 4 to 6 reps, 12 total sets. I go from there back to the house, and I take a 10-minute cold shower because it does a couple different things. Just really wakes you up like you've never been woke up before, which is one part of it. Yeah. It helps your immune system. It also is really good for burning white fat, which is a type of fat you don't want in your body. You want brown fat, which is thermogenic fat. And I go from there to really digging through my emails and stuff like that. And I don't really take a call until 10 o'clock, just because I find that if you do that too early in your day, you kind of get detoured and you never really get through those basic things you want to get through every day.
No, that makes sense. Started off right. Well, yeah. Your area of expertise is storytelling. So tell us a little bit about that.
So story is that thing that kind of gives you permission in order to teach people. I think a lot of times people think that their whole life story makes an impact on what they're doing now. And honestly, you take a look at what you're doing now, the impact you make now, and you find the parts of your story that were the transformation that helps you to do that. And that's the thing that really gives you permission to teach people. But oftentimes I'll find, and it's funny because it's also affected how I interview people on my podcast. At one point in time in the beginning, I over-prepared. I had 45 questions for an interview. And then I kind of moved into saying hey, what's your story? Which is a really bad plan, because when you open it up, you're kind of letting people tell you where to start it. And what you would find is a lot of people are like, all right, when I was 9 years old, I blah. So by the time you get to 45 minutes, they've spent the whole time in your story and you haven't really taught anything. So really what I've found is it's finding those pointed, important areas that are impactful to what someone is doing now and show transformation, which really gives permission to teach. And that's really the quality of a great story, is something that can teach and help other people to move from where they are now to where they want to be, or the impact that they want to make.
Excellent. Well, that leads right into the next question, and that is, what's a memorable story that you can share about how you personally had to live out winning the day?
Oh, gosh. There's a lot of different ideas on this. So I had the first version of what I do now, which is Command Your Brand. The original version was called Get Featured. And we had come out of the gate. We had made 6 figures in our first 6 months in business, which for a brand new business is decent. And we were kind of all headed in the right direction. But my co-founder and I just really didn't see eye to eye. He wasn't a bad guy. I wasn't a bad guy. But at the same time, we had to realize, like, where was this going to go and what direction were we going to take in it? So I had to honestly just say, hey, I'm done, and decide what I was going to do from there. And that was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, because for the next 3 months, we made like no money. And I had to figure out how I was going to pay staff, how I was going to keep people going, and how I was going to like not let that transition fall apart. That was one of the most difficult decisions I had to make. But at the same time, it's the idea of, the book Good to Great, right? Like, you have to take a look at what you have that's good. And if it's not going to be your definition of great, you need to figure out how to move on from that. And sometimes that can be a really, really hard decision.
Wow. So in hindsight, what was the way to get through that? I mean, how did you personally tackle that challenge?
Well, I'll tell you what, man, like I come from a very like lower middle class family. So like my idea of like $100,000 is like the most money you could ever make. So like, oh my God, I had created this thing and it was the greatest thing ever. So like, it was first of all handling that for myself. Like, I created this thing. Could I do it again? Because I had done it with someone else's help. So that was kind of the idea of it. So that once I kind of wrapped my head around that, the biggest lesson was, I guess, just really the only security is in yourself, right? It's in yourself and your ability to create, because economies can change, businesses can change, things can change. But if you put security in yourself and your own ability to create, that's one of the best lessons you can ever learn, because you can take that with you your entire life. And I think that's why, personal development is so important. Personal branding is so important, because it creates, you are the asset in that way. And I think that's the greatest lesson I've learned.
I love it. Well, and so we've got people that are on live. Certainly feel free to pop a question in there if you want Jeremy to field it. I know he'd entertain that. But one of the things I want to touch upon that I want you to just share what you feel comfortable with is, I've watched you from afar now for a while, and I just appreciate your overall attitude of things. And I watched an interview or listened to an interview on Fire Nation where you shared of your near-death experience playing football, and also about your mom having a stroke. What helped you be successful working through all that?
Well, first of all, I don't want to take credit for being like a big football player, Division I football player, or something like that. Like, dude, it was kind of embarrassing. Like, we would get together every weekend and we'd play these tackle football games without pads and just beat the hell out of each other. But I was like really athletic, right? I was like, this 5'7", 200 pound guy that would knock over defensive linemen like running through. So I would do some crazy stuff, and I was fast. I ran a 4.27 in my last year of high school. Wow. But this is literally like, I wasn't playing organized football, so I don't want to take credit for that. But I was playing, and we took everything too seriously, right? Like, everybody had the Under Armour sleeves and the eye black, and it was nuts. And I was in my 5-yard, and right, like, we played it like we were playing football. So I did a 5-yard back pedal as a cornerback to run with the receiver, and you turn and run after 5 yards, and I stepped in a drain. I tore every major ligament in my left knee. Like, it literally was so severe I couldn't feel it. Because, like, your adrenaline gets going and everything else. Like, I literally couldn't feel it. My body was shielding me from it because it was such a severe injury. And I just couldn't get up off the ground. I'm like, okay, can't stand up, guys. This is not good. So I had a friend take me to the hospital, and they said, hey, you tore your ACL, PCL, meniscus. So it was pretty severe. And the surgery from it is actually, believe it or not that bad. They do what's called a cadaver ligament surgery. So they take ligaments from dead bodies they've harvested, and they sew them into your body. Just think about that for a minute.
Oh, wow.
Your body tends to bond with that tissue, but a lot of times when they're doing like a knee surgery like that, they'll like cut open your hamstring and take it from your hamstring or whatever it is. So like, that's a really significant recovery time. So I'm like, all right, this sounds like a easy surgery. And the surgery itself went really well. The problem that I had is the anesthesia that they used to put you to sleep, they messed it up. They stuck it all the way into my right lung, when actually it's supposed to go between your right and your left lung to keep you awake, or to keep you breathing. And my right lung overexpanded, my left lung collapsed, and my blood oxygen level was plummeting. So for about 3 days, I was awake and I was asleep. I was awake and I was asleep. And they basically told my parents, like, hey, we don't know if he's going to make it because we can't get his oxygen levels up. So they were checking my heart, checking my lungs. And I found out later on that after the statute of limitations ran out, of course, that they probably knew what they had done. They just didn't want to tell my parents at that point in time at 19 years old.
Right.
So, they brought in a priest. I got last rites.
Oh my goodness.
It was intense, man. And it's a weird experience too, because the way I explain it is it's not like you're in the room, you are the room, if you know what I mean, because it's such a disembodied experience. And I could feel all the emotions, I could feel everything in there, but I wasn't really like communicating with people. And then just, 3 days in, they got my blood oxygen level up enough that I could stay conscious. But it was a very intense experience, and it's weird because it's like you're aware of the whole thing, but you're not awake, which is weird.
Wow. And you were 19.
I was 19, yeah.
And what your mom having her stroke, about what time frame was that? Was that the same?
So that was when I was 24. I was teaching high school for about a year at that point in time. I had gotten my master's degree a couple years before, and I was kind of overqualified for every job, so nobody would hire me. So I ended up getting a job teaching private school, and I wasn't very happy doing it. I was actually quite miserable because I just didn't really have the training to be able to do it. And my mom ended up having a stroke, and it really shook me, right? Because it was somebody other than myself. It wasn't me. And it kind of shook every certainty I had in my life, which is weird because, like I said, I almost died myself.
Right.
But almost losing a parent, it really shakes you and makes you look at a lot of things, and it made me look at the bigger, wider world, and made me look at the possibilities of if I died today, what wasn't I going to do? So it really kind of opened me up to a lot more impact on what I could do in the world.
Absolutely. Well, Brian Mills chimed in. That is an intense story, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing. And I agree.
Oh, so I'm happy to help, Brian.
So how did you keep positivity through those? Those are intense. I mean, Brian's right. Those are intense scenarios. How did you get to where you are today through such amazing challenges?
It's interesting because I think the first one, it's more or less you're 19 years old, so you think you're invincible. You know what I mean? A lot of things can happen to you when you're younger, and you're like, well, I didn't die. I guess that's good.
Right.
But the thing that is harder when you get older, and mid-20s is slightly older, but first of all, being a parent, it's not yourself, so you start to look at it for being different than things. You know what I mean? When it's outside of yourself, you look at it differently, you experience it differently. So that first of all was an important part to it. And initially, I didn't really hold it together, man. I was very emotional. I really struggled with it. And it was having the right people around me.
Right. Support.
At that time, that was 2012. I had been dating my wife for 2 years at that point. We've been together since 2010.
Excellent.
And having that right person around me and that right relationship around me really helped me. But I think for a lot of people, when you don't have relationships and when you don't have people you are that emotionally close to, it makes you struggle. It really does. So for me, it was just having the right people that were supportive of me, and kind of could see that bigger picture that I saw.
Well, I appreciate you keeping that attitude, and you've gone on to do incredible things.
It's not easy early on, Ted. I don't want to say oh my gosh, I had it all together, because I think a lot of people like to tell that story, and it's just not true most of the time. Well,
I appreciate your honesty in that. And that's what people want to hear, right? Because we all think we're alone in those types of scenarios, and the truth be told, we're not. And we need that support, and I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing. Now, am I understanding that your wife and you actually work together too on some levels at Command Your Brand?
Yeah, so it's crazy because we started so far apart, and I remember in 2013 being wouldn't it be cool if we worked together? And she's like, no, it wouldn't. Because she's been in the PR world since high school. Literally, she's been working. She's worked in her family business. She's done. She went to school for PR, all that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm the world's biggest nerd. I have a master's in ancient history. Who does that? So where we come from I took Latin for 12 years. So where we come from is very, very far apart. And the crazy thing is, when I started the podcast, she was very, very supportive of that. So she helped me with getting in the right media, getting the right press, positioning things the right way. And, as things kind of grew, we realized that she was a large part of why I was successful. So when we founded Command Your Brand, we positioned ourselves as the PR firm for the podcast space. And, she's the COO. She runs our whole publicity team, and she really sets the targeting for every contract we do and stuff like that. And I'm out there running our sales team and getting PR and getting attention. And, I see the podcast as really a large part of getting attention for the company. So yeah, we work together every single day, and we really I couldn't do this without her.
There you go, the dynamic duo. I love it. Well, Laura chimed in and said, Jeremy, really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability. Great attitude.
Thank you, Laura.
And I agree. So let me just ask you one last question, Jeremy. So how do you personally unwind after winning the day?
There's a lot of different viewpoints on that, because it also depends on the day, right? Like every day doesn't depend on the right viewpoint. I will tell you, it's always, with my wife in some way, shape, or form, just because like we are best friends. And I don't say that, as jokingly, like literally, like we both know each other better than any other person. She would tell you the same thing. And, some nights it's a glass of wine. She's pregnant right now, so it isn't. But
Congratulations.
Other nights, thank you. Other nights I'm enjoying a cigar. Recently, it's been things that don't involve thinking, like watching The Office. I think Michael Scott is one of the greatest people to ever live. So like, for me, it's usually just relaxing with my family. It's a big part of why I do what I do, and getting to enjoy that time is really, really important.
That's awesome. Well, again,
and I do have a guilty pleasure for playing a 15-year-old PlayStation Portable though. Sometimes I'm still playing Madden 10, man, because they stopped making games for it like 8 years ago.
Too vulnerable. Well, again, I know you're a very busy man. You are continually out there spreading joy. I'm grateful that you took time to be with us today. I know that you've made the listeners really think about just how you're out there and building your brand, and I appreciate it. And so on that note, we've come to the end of our time. So go win the day every day.